All right, Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, Perek Beis. Just to recap what happened last week. Basically, we have Rabbi Eliezer who was working for his father in the farming business, and he decided that he wants to go off and learn Torah, and he was crying a lot, and he ended up meeting Eliyahu Novi, and Eliyahu Novi gave him an eitzah to go to Yerushalayim and learn by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he went to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he was having a little trouble fitting in over there, because he was smelling, because he was fasting, and then they kicked him out, and then he was crying that he got kicked out, and at the end of the day, everything worked out. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai hooked him up with people to give him food, and he was able to eat, and it seemed like he was getting used to his stay in yeshiva. You think it's a happy ending, but we have one more part of the story that we have to reconcile Rabbi Eliezer with his family. That's what Perek Beis is going to be about. Rabbi Eliezer, remember, ran away from his family. He ran away from his father and his. So how are they going to come back together, and what's going to be their interaction between the two? So let's see, Perek Beis. Amru Banov Shel Hurkanus Lavihem. The sons of Hurkanus. Rabbi Eliezer's father's name was Hurkanus. Right? We said that Hurkanus was one of the Chashuva Balabatim. He was one of the big rich people over there in Eretz Yisrael. So the sons of Hurkanus said to their father, Alei lechol Yerushalayim v'nadei es bincha Eliezer min chasecha. Let's go to Yerushalayim, and we're going to excommunicate Eliezer, your son, from your property. We're going to go, and why do you have to go to Yerushalayim? Because I guess they have the ledger, or they have the records. Make sure that we're going to legally go to the court and make sure that we're going to disown our brother. Make sure they told their father, let's go disown Eliezer. Make sure that he doesn't get any portion in the inheritance. He ran away from the family. He's not. The HaGadol says that the pshat is that they told their father, they convinced him, he ran away from you when you're an old man, and you need extra help, and he ran away, and you think that after you die he's going to come back and he's going to want a portion like all the other brothers that are still here. No, we don't want to have any of that. Let's get rid of him from part of the family. We're kicking him out of the family. But apparently, in order to do that, you have to go to Yerushalayim, to go to the capital, to go to the government offices, and make sure everything is beseder. Otherwise, afterwards, he's going to come and say, the halacha is, I get Yerusha. So you have to formalize it and go to the Misrad Pnim or however they do it.
Historically, how far after Bayit Sheni is this?
This is towards the end of the Bayit Sheni. It's during the Bayit Sheni.
So why wouldn't they go there?
Why wouldn't they go where?
Why do they have to go to government offices? Why wouldn't they go to Bayit Sheni, to the Beis Din?
Well, I'm saying could be that's what it means. To Yerushalayim, to whoever was in charge of these things. It was definitely under Roman governmental. What's the word I'm looking for? Oversight, whatever. They were the ones in charge. So I guess you would have to clear it with them. Maybe that's what the pshat. Maybe it means to the business, to the Sanhedrin Yerushalayim. It doesn't really say. But the point is that we're going to go to Yerushalayim and disown Rabbi Eliezer. So all of Yerushalayim, they went to Yerushalayim to excommunicate him. And they came to Yerushalayim and they found that there was a special Yom Tov for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What it means, the term Yom Tov Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai means that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was making a special Suda. The Marzu suggests that possibly he had some sort of nace that happened to him, a personal nace that he was making a Suda Seidah, or maybe he was making a Chasana, or maybe he was making a bris, a personal Simcha of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, or the Radal says something that makes a little bit more sense. The Gemara uses the term Yom Tova l'Rabbanan to mean a siyum. When you finish a Masechta, make a siyum. So Yom Tov l'Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is like Yom Tova l'Rabbanan. He was making a siyum maybe. Whatever it was, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the Nasi, was having some sort of party. And all the chashuva people were there. All the big shot, everyone was there at this big Suda with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the Medrash is going to list off who was there and explain a little bit about it. So we're going to a little bit go into this before continuing the story, because it's a little bit interesting. Ben Tzitzis HaKeses, Nakdimon ben Gurion and Kalba Savua. These three people. The first one is named Ben Tzitzis HaKeses, Nakdimon ben Gurion, and Ben Kalba Savua. Three different people. They were the chashuva people. Not the chashuv Talmidei Chachamim necessarily, but they were the chashuv. They were the rich people. Their names were on the side of every building. So the Gemara, the Medrash speaks about exactly why they called these names and a little bit about each of these three people. Why is this guy called Ben Tzitzis HaKeses, which literally means the son of Tzitzis, the pillow? What does that mean? He would recline above the chashuv people of Yerushalayim. The way they used to have meals by the upper class was they would have sort of like these couches where they would like recline and lay down the couches. So he was so chashuv that he was like above everyone else. He was like the most chashuv. The Gemara in Gittin, in Parak Hanizakin, when it talks about the Gemaras about the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, talks about Ben Tzitzis HaKeses and says two pshatim why he's named Ben Tzitzis HaKeses. One pshat, I don't exactly understand what this means, but the Gemara Gurion and Kalba Savua, his tzitzis was dragging on pillows and covers while he was walking. And the Marshova there, that means that he was very careful in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Not sure exactly why that's called being very careful in the mitzvah of tzitzis, but that's what the Marshal says. The other pshat that the Gemara says is Shahaya Kisle Munach Ben Gedorei Roimi. His chair was up there with the chashuv people of Rome. He had it in with the higher ups over there in Roman society. So that's Ben Tzitzis HaKeses. The second one, Amra Nakdimon ben Gurion. Nakdimon ben Gurion, he's a shtickle famous person. Some people say that Nakdimon ben Gurion, actually is interesting, but Nakdimon ben Gurion was the brother of Yosef ben Gurion. Yosef ben Gurion is known as Flavius Josephus, the famous Jewish Roman historian. He was a kohen, who was a general, and he may have betrayed the Jews and joined with the Romans. But some scholars want to say that Nakdimon ben Gurion was the brother of Yosef ben Gurion. It's not clear exactly that's muchach b'chlal. And then there's of course David ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel. But that's a different story. So they say about Nakdimon ben Gurion, Shahayalai Mizain Shleish Soim Kamach L'chol Echad Ve'echad Shahay B'Yerushalayim. They said about Nakdimon ben Gurion that he had 3 saw of flour for every person that lived in Yerushalayim. Now the Radal brings an alternate medrash that speaks about Nakdimon ben Gurion, and the Radal says that it says in other midrashim that Nakdimon ben Gurion had enough grain in his storage house to feed the whole country for 10 years. And then the Radal makes an interesting cheshbon. It says, well, over here we say it has 3 saw for every person in Yerushalayim. So 3 saw, it comes out to be 18 kav. And there's a Gemara that says in Mesachas Eruvin that 1 kav can be 9 meals. So if you do 9 times 18, it'll come out that this 3 saw is 162 meals. Now 162 meals is a lot of meals, but it's not 10 years worth of meals. So the Radal says that it could be that this medrash is arguing with the other midrashim. He wants to say that the Radal says that maybe it means that if for 1 meal he would have this much each person.
This is just Yerushalayim.
This is just Yerushalayim, yeah.
But there he would have one for everyone in
the whole right. It says Shel Medina. So that's a little bit of a description of Nakdimon ben Gurion. The third person, Amrullah al ben Kalba Savua. The third person, ben Kalba Savua, Shahayaloi Beis Arba Kairin Shel Gines Teichanin Bezav. Ben Kalba Savua, in other places, his name is given as Kalba Savua, which literally, if you translate the name, Kalba means dog, and Savua means satisfied. And Chazal in other places say that his name is called Kalba Savua because if you came into his house as hungry as a dog, you would come out satisfied. So Kalba and Savua, beginning Kalba and then Savua. Well, either way, he was actually the father-in-law of Rabbi Kiva. We know Rabbi Kiva married the girl who was looking for a person who wasn't necessarily a Talmid Chacham but had the midas of a Talmid Chacham. That was the daughter of Ben Kalba Savua. But Ben Kalba Savua had what it says is as a base arba kairin shel ginais teichen and bezad. He had the amount of 4 kar. 4 kar is a amount of a square measurement. I don't know, square hectares or I don't know a measurement of area, I don't know, acres or something like that. So he had that much space, property of ginois, teichanen bezahav, of gardens where the Radal explains what it means is that he had gardens that if you sifted the ground of the gardens, you would find gold in it. He wants to change it. The Radal is not exactly sure of exactly the girsa over here of what was happening with Ben Kalba Savua. He says that maybe it means it's supposed to say not toichanin bizahav, but soimchei zahav. That things that would grow in dirt that has specks of gold in it or something, and you could, if you sifted it out, you could find gold. And it's interesting that the Radal says that this property that Ben Kalba Savua had that has gold in the dirt, he wants to say that it's not in Eretz Yisrael. I'll read you his lashon. He says, "Va'alkilem isi musker b'shum okim oid shayinim tzom Eretz Yisrael machatzei zahav v'kesef v'nitzarech lidchik shayiloi zel Nakdimon b'chutz la'aretz." You have to say we don't find anywhere that Eretz Yisrael is not known for being a place where you can find gold. We never had any gold rushes in Tzfas or anything, right? We never hear about there being gold in Eretz Yisrael. So he wants to say that based on that you have to say that Nakdimon and Gurion had these properties that have gold in it, not in Eretz Yisrael, in Chutz La'aretz. And this isn't his final explanation, but then he explains. He brings the psukim when it talks about Eretz Yisrael. He says in the psukim talking about the praise of Eretz Yisrael, we don't find that it says that Eretz Yisrael had gold. For example, it says in the pasuk, Eretz asher b'leibim eskenus teichal bo lachem lo yisach sar kol bo, the land which not with destitute are you going to be eating bread, it's not lacking anything. Eretz asher avoneha barzel u'mehararea tachtzay nechishes, the land which is mountains are made out of iron, and its rocks are iron, and its mountains are made out of bronze or copper. Also, we say in Parshas V'Zayis HaBracha, Barzel and Necheshes min alecha chamecha davecha. So we find in the Pesukim where it says about Eretz Yisrael that it has iron and it has bronze, but we don't find about Eretz Yisrael that it has gold and silver. And the Radal makes an assumption, which we're going to call into question in a moment. He says, if Eretz Yisrael had gold and silver, the pasuk wouldn't stop and say, oh, it has Barzel and Necheshes. It would also say that you find gold and silver in Eretz Yisrael. From the fact that the pasuk doesn't say that Eretz Yisrael is gold and silver, we can deduce that Eretz Yisrael doesn't have gold and silver. And that's why he wants to say that this property of Nakdimon ben Gurion wasn't in Eretz Yisrael. We said that Nakdimon ben Gurion has property that if you sift the dirt of the property, you'll find gold. But we don't find anywhere in Tanakh that it says that Eretz Yisrael has gold in it. So the Radal is saying that it must be that property wasn't in Eretz Yisrael, it was in Chutz La'aretz. And his raya was that from these psukim where it says that about Eretz Yisrael, that Eretz Yisrael has Barzel and Necheshes, and if Eretz Yisrael had Zav and Kesef, it would have said Zav and Kesef, right? Because the Eretz Yisrael now Barzel and Haratach Zav Necheshes, it says Barzel Necheshes min alacha uchamecha davecha. But it doesn't say anything about gold and silver. So from the fact that the pasuk doesn't say anything about gold and silver, but it does talk about Barzel and Necheshes, you see that Eretz Yisrael doesn't have gold and silver. So he wants to say that these fields that Nakdimon ben Gurion had were in Chutz La'aretz, not in Eretz Yisrael. Interestingly, I found, just to speak a little bit more about this before moving on to finishing up the story, but I found in a journal called Kovetz Beis Aaron V'Yisrael from Karlin Stolin. So they printed a few years back. They printed what one of the grandsons of the Sfas Emes wrote on the side of his edition of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer with the Radal. And on this shtickle, he says, look at Rabbeinu Bachai in Parshas Eikav. So if you look in Rabbeinu Bachai in Parshas Eikav, Rabbeinu Bachai says like this. V'tam asher avonah barzel, on this pasuk of Eretz asher avonah barzel u'maharera tachsav necheshes. Tam asher avonah barzel b'mokim shetachshev shesham avonim shom timtza barzel. What it means is Eretz asher avonah barzel, that its stones are iron, is when you would think that there would be a stone, there should be a stone over here, you'll check and it's not really a stone, it's really a piece of iron. Or when you would think that there's supposed to be a mountain, like a regular mountin, it's really it's an ore of copper. Right? The pasuk said, and then it says, so this is what it means when it says Eretz Yisrael. It's not lacking anything. Why? Lacking iron and bronze is a great lack for a land. If it doesn't have iron and bronze, that's a big chisaron. Because that's how they made all their vessels, the knives and all their cutlery and a lot of other things that they used in every plowing, and all these things that they made was out of iron and copper, iron and bronze. Gold and silver, it's not such a chisaron if it doesn't have gold and silver. Rabbeinu Bachya is saying, Rabbeinu Bachya, whatever, however you want to pronounce it, is saying that the Torah is speaking out that Eretz Yisrael has Barzel and Choishes, but doesn't speak out that it has Kesef and Zov, because if it doesn't have Kesef and Zov, that's not such a big deal. If it doesn't have Barzel and Choishes, that makes it that the land is lacking something, because Barzel and Choishes was, if you know anything about paleontology a little bit, so they have the Iron Age and the Bronze Age. So whatever that means to us, but we see that bronze and iron were the staple metals in that. If it lacked bronze and iron, it's a big chisaron. So the HaGadol wants to bring a raya that from the fact that the Torah doesn't say that Eretz Yisrael had gold and silver, you see that it didn't have gold and silver, and the Nakdimon and Gurion's fields of gold must have been in Chutz La'aretz. But according to Rabbeinu Bachya, you don't see that from the psukim. Because the reason why the psukim dafka spoke about Barzel and the Choishes is because those were the staple metals that were needed for society then. Gold and silver, if it doesn't have gold and silver, it's not such a big deal. Rabbeinu Bachya doesn't say whether it does have gold and silver. He's just saying that whether it has it or not, the Torah didn't feel a need to speak it out. So if you say like this, then you don't have the Radal's raya. I found that a very interesting thing, that's why I spoke it up. Then the HaGadol wants to say another pshat, that what it means about we're talking about Kalba ben Kalba Savua, not Nakdimon ben Gurion. But when it says about ben Kalba Savua that he had these gold, so he wants to change the girsa and say that it means kirais shahayaloi palchin shel base dalad karim v'chol kirais buchupe zav, that he had a palace that was an area of 4 kor, that the walls of the palace was plated with gold. That's a little bit more. I'm not saying that his field grew gold. The gold doesn't grow on a tree. But or another pshat the HaGadol wants to say is that he had storage houses full of gold, and the storage houses were dalad kor big. Al Kapanim ben Kalba Savua was a rich man.
No, there's a Gemara that says why he was called that.
What?
Kalba Savua.
Yeah, we mentioned that.
Oh, you mentioned
yeah.
it already. Okay, sorry. But here, it doesn't want to say that. It wants to say that he was just rich.
Well, it doesn't not say. It's not talking about his name.
Why he's called
right.
Savua, as opposed to the other.
Right. Just
one,
right. By Ben Sitz as a Kesed, it says why he's called that.
Why he's called that.
Yeah, it's interesting that why he doesn't decide to speak it out.
And here, because here it's talking about that these were the richest guys of the land, and they were at their suitable.
Al Kapanim, so there's this major party with all the rich people here, and that's what Hyrcanus comes to Yerushalayim, and he wants to excommunicate his son, and that's what he encounters. So Amru Loi, the people, the students that came, and they told Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Harei Aviv Shel Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer's father is coming. So what does Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai say? Amar lahem, Oslei Makim, let's make a place for him. Oslei Makim, Yeshiva Oslei Etzlei. They made a special place for Hyrcanus. He was a chashav, a person, but he wasn't like one of the spitz. But they put him over there on the front table, right next to Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. So what does Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai do? V'nos ein of Rabbi Eliezer. He puts his eye upon Rabbi Eliezer. Now, usually in Chazal, when it says that someone put his eye on someone, it's usually a bad thing, and the guy ends up dead, right? But here it's a good thing. He put his eye. Usually it's like in the ayin hara, like a bad thing. But here it was the Bais HaGadol says that Nos an Eina Rabbi Eliezer ba'ayin toiva. It was an ayin toiva. It was a good eye. He put his eye upon Rabbi Eliezer with the implication saying, "No, Rabbi Eliezer, maybe you could say some divrei Torah." Amar, he said to Rabbi Eliezer, "Amar lanu davar echad min Torah." Maybe you could say something, some divrei Torah over here by the meal. So Rabbi Eliezer refuses to say the Torah, and instead he responds with a mashal. Amar le Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, emshalacha mashal. I'm going to give you a mashal. Lama davar daima. What is this comparable to? Labor hazeh she'ena yachal lahitzi mayim yerisir mimasha hayamaytzi. To this pit which can't release water more than it says in our Gersa Pikdos, it says mimasha hayamaytzi, more than it releases, which doesn't make sense. It can't release more than it releases. The Marzu changes the Gersa to Yosir Mimasha Haya Machnes. A pit of water can't take out more water than you put into it. So it says, so too I can't say more divrei Torah than what I received from you. So it's a joke for me to say divrei Torah in front of you. Like you gave me everything I had. So like why should I say in front of you? It doesn't make any sense. That was Rabbi Eliezer's reaction when his Rebbe told him to say a vart by this big suda. Amaloi. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said back to him, "No, I have a different mashal. I'm shalacha mashal. I have a different mashal. Lama davar daima. To what is this comparable to? Lemayan zeh shayaneveo moitzi mayim. To this a spring which is flowing and is releasing water. V'yesh b'koicho lahitzi mayim yos v'mashu machdes. There's a little bit of a spring coming in, and at the other end the spring is still gushing out, right? Even if a little bit is trickling in, it's still going to be pushing out more and more water. So too you, Rabbi Eliezer, you are going to be able to say divrei Torah more than what you were makabel by Har Sinai. Not just more than you were makabel from me. The Radal brings that the Gersa of the Vilna Gaon of the Gra was Yosef Mimasha Kibul Mimeni, more than you were makabel from me. But our Gersa says Yosef Mimasha Kibul Misinai. The Radal says that the Vilna Gaon didn't like our Gersa because we have other midrashim that say Afilu Masha Talmud Vasik Osid Loimar Lifnei Rabbi. That was even what a Talmud is going to say in front of his Rebbe. That was already said to Moshe Rabbeinu by Har Sinai. So you can't. So the Gaon understood that it's impossible to say more than what was said at Har Sinai. But our Gersa says that he said more than by Har Sinai. Last week we mentioned this idea that Rabbi Eliezer was able to understand certain secrets of the Paraduma that was not revealed to Moshe Rabbeinu. So you could understand that maybe the Radal says that this is an allusion to that idea, that Rabbi Eliezer was able to understand things that even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have by Har Sinai. The Marzu wants to say that by Har Sinai they didn't really speak out everything. They just said in general all the different mitzvahs, and Rabbi Eliezer spoke things out with more details. So then it's more than what was said at Har Sinai. Okay. So Rabbi Eliezer didn't want to make a drasha. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, "Shema mimeni atam mispayish." Maybe you're embarrassed from me. I'm your Rebbe. If I'm standing here, you're not going to say a drasha in front of me. But maybe Hareini oimed me atzlacha. I'll go away from you. I'll stand away from you, and then you can make your drasha, and I won't be here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan v'halach leilchutz. Rabbi Yochanan got up and he went outside. V'haya Rabbi Eliezer yeshev v'dayresh. And Rabbi Eliezer started darshaning. Upanav me'ireis, Rabbi Eliezer dan and he darshaned. Upanav me'ireis karachama, and his face was shining like the face of the sun. The karnais of yotzes karnais of Shalmeisha, and there were rays of light coming off of his face, like the rays of light that Moshe Rabbeinu had. And you couldn't tell if it was their light because the light from his Torah was so shining and so luminescent that it lit up the day, it lit up the night. You couldn't tell if it was day or night. Like Las Vegas, they have all these lights. You can't tell when you're inside. You don't know what's happening. LaHavdil. But he didn't know. That was the drasha of Rabbi Eliezer, and it actually doesn't say what Rabbi Eliezer darshaned about. It says that he was darshaning, and it was all light, and the rays of... What was Rabbi Eliezer talking about? It doesn't say. So, interestingly, the Ramban in Shara Gmul, that's like the Ramban sefer about like Olam Haba and things like that. So Ramban in Shara Gmul writes that Amr Olav al Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol Kishahaya Derish B'Maisa Bereshis Hayu Karnois of Yitzis Kekarnois of Shal Moshe. That when Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol would darshan about Maisa Bereshis, so he would have these rays of light like the rays of Moshe Rabbeinu Ve'en Adam Yadeh Im Yom Im Laila. So it seems like the Ramban understood that Rabbi Eliezer was darshaning about Maisa Bereshis. And as the Radal points out, from Parag Gimel and on for the next program after Parag Gimel, it's talking about the story of Maisa Bereshis. So it makes sense that what was Rabbi Eliezer darshaning? The rest of the sefer, or at least the next few program of the sefer. That's the way the Ramban says it. The Radal says that it's not Muchach, and he wants to say that maybe Rabbi Eliezer was darshaning other things, but we have a Ramban, and that's what we can say that's the pashtus. Maybe if we have more time at the end, I'll speak a little bit more about this Nakuda of Ein Adam Yodea Im Yom Im Laila. But it's interesting, the Radal brings up the Zohar says that when he says it sounds like from the Zohar when it's talking about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Eliezer, his son, that when it says over there about them that they couldn't tell if it was day or night when they were in the cave, it's not because they couldn't tell it was day or night because it was like physically light, but rather that they were so davuk to the light of the Torah that they weren't able to feel or to be sensitive to these physical changes in their surroundings. They couldn't tell if it was their light because they were so engrossed in what they were doing. But over here, Lav Dafka is that the pshat. Maybe we'll see later on in the end. Let's continue. So Rabbi Eliezer says this whole drasha. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai me'achorav u'nishakei al roshav. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai his Rebbe came up behind him and he kissed him on his head. Ashreichem Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov she'yotza zeh mechalatzeichem. Praiseworthy is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that this person came from their offspring. Now, Omar Hukanas was the father of Eliezer, says, who are you saying that about? Omar Eliezer bincha, about Eliezer your son. Great praise about Rabbi Eliezer. Shouldn't you have said this? You shouldn't say, oh, Ashrei Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, that this. You should say, praiseworthy is Horkanus, that this guy is my son. The Marzu says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai set this up specifically to bring out the point that Horkanus should appreciate that his son became a Talmid Chacham, and he should realize, you're getting upset that I said Avram Yitzchak Yaakov instead of you. Well, you don't care that he's a Talmid. He apparently the Marzu says that it could be that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai even realized that Horkanus came to excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer from his property, and he was trying to show him that maybe you shouldn't do that. And it seems like it worked. So we don't see what happened over there with the continuation of that Shakla V'Tarya between Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Horkanus. But the Medrash continues and says, Rabbi Eliezer Yeshev v'Darish v'Aviv Omed Arad. Rabbi Eliezer was sitting down and darshaning, and his father was standing on his feet. Now, the way it used to work was, in previous generations, usually the person who was teaching would sit, and the people who were listening to the shir would stand. Right? Now we have the opposite. I'm standing, and you guys are sitting.
Also in Avos, though, Perek Rishon, Yossi ben Yoezer, maybe in the that you should sit at the feet.
Havim misabik ba'afar agleim shel Talmid Chachamim.
Is that the Lashon?
Yeah, here. Rabbi Yossi ben Yoezer ish tzreida omer yi beis labeis v'ad lechachamim v'avim misabik ba'afar agleim. So
you're not saying exactly that
they should sit.
Okay, they're sitting.
You should kiss their feet, like when you go visit the Pope, you kiss his feet. I don't know. Lahavdil. But so it used to be that the person darshaning would sit and everyone else would stand. Nowadays, the Gemara says that the generations, as the generations progressed, people became weaker. So it's just the person giving the shir would stand and then everyone else would sit.
Is that why it's called a yeshiva?
Interesting.
Somewhere it's coming that's why it's called the yeshiva because everyone there is going to sit.
Sit.
They're
I hear.
sitting to hear the shir.
Interesting.
The Rav
The Rav stands. I hear. Interesting. So Rabbi Eliezer was sitting, and everyone, including his father, was standing. Rabbi Eliezer yeshiv v'darish v'aviv amid araglo. His father was standing on his feet. When he saw that his father was standing and he was sitting, he was in the middle of his drasha, on the side over there, at the head table of Rabbi Eliezer's father and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had a little shakavatari about Ashrecha and whatever. But then Rabbi Eliezer realizes, wait, my father is here and he's standing, and it bothered him. He was like confused, surprised. It was bothering him because even though lahalacha, if your father is meichal kvaydai machol, but it still it didn't feel right.
It's a halacha that he should.
Right. His father was meichal because he stood up on his own volition. He could have sat down or whatever he wanted, but he didn't feel right. So Amalai Abba shave. He said to his father, sit down, Abba, sit down. I can't say divrei Torah and you're standing. Not that I can't halachically, but I can't bring myself to do such a thing. Which, besides another nukuda he could be showing his father is that he doesn't have anything against the family. It's not like not being mechabed you. It's just that I decided that I have to go learn Torah, and I still mechabed you, and ad kedei kach that it bothers me that you're standing when I'm trying to teach. Amaloi, interestingly, this is what brought out his father to speak about this, to speak about what his father came to do. Amaloi bini loyal kain bosi elonadezcha minachasai. No, I didn't. Don't worry. I didn't come to hear your drasha. I came to excommunicate you from my property. Now that I came to see you, and I see all this great praise about you, and all these things are saying, and you're sitting here with all the Gedolei Yerushalayim, and they ask you to darshan, and you become one of the Gedolei Ador. So now we're going to do the opposite. Your brothers are excommunicated from my property. And I'm giving you as a matana all the property. He has to be given as a matana because, as we know, the Gemara in Bava Basra says that it's also to change the inheritance, even from a bad son to give it all to a good son. You're not allowed to do that. You can't play around. The Torah says all the sons get divided equally. That's the chayk that the Torah says. That's the way it goes. You can't play around with it. But if you give it as a present when you're still alive, then you can play around. Right? Avraham Avinu he sort of disowned Yishmael. He disowned Yishmael and the Bnei Keturah, and to Yitzchak he gave all his property. We say in this upcoming week's Parshas Chayesara, when Eliezer was going to find a shidduch for Yitzchak, says B'chol tuv v'adainav beyadai. He had all of Avraham Avinu's possessions in his hand. What does that mean? He had all his possessions in his hand. He had a document that said, Avraham Avinu, he says, right, I hereby give all my possessions to Yitzchak. Right? So he had that document. That was worth everything that Avraham Avinu had. So here too, Hyrcanus was going to give as a present all his property to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, he could be very rich after this, but he says no. I am not even equal to one of my brothers. He's going to say he doesn't want anything, or the Marzu says that he doesn't say that he doesn't any shava ke'echad mehem. He writes any shava ela ke'echad mehem. I'm not that I'm not equal to even one of them. It means I'm only equal to one of them. Don't give me the Yerusha instead of all of them. Rather, give me my own portion like each one of them. If I wanted property, if I would have asked Hashem for property, He would have given it to me. The land belongs to Hashem, everything that's within it. If I would have asked Hashem for gold and silver, He would have given it to me. To me is the silver, and to me is the gold, the word of Hashem. host of the legions, or whatever they call it. Rather, I'm only requesting from Kadosh Baruch Hu that I should be able to sit and learn Torah. Shadamar brings a pasuk in Tehillim. Al kain kol pekudei chol yisharti. All the pekudei chol, the statutes of everything, which is the Torah, yisharti. That's straight. That's what I want. And kol orach sheker sanesi. All the paths of falsehood, which is the Beis HaGadol says is referring to all inyani olam hazeh, which are considered falsehoods. That sanesi, that I hate. So Rabbi Eliezer is saying, I don't want to be nana from the fact that I'm a Talmud Chacham. If I wanted all these things, I could have gotten it. Hashem could have given it to me, but I don't want these things. I just want to sit and learn. The question is whether he's saying, don't give me any Yerusha B'chlal, or he's saying, just give me Yerusha like everyone else. That's the point. It could be the Marzu when he talks about this, he's sort of mesupach whether Rabbi Eliezer is saying he doesn't want anything B'chlal, or he just wants the same chelik as his brothers. Could be that the word is that if he wouldn't have been a big Talmud Chacham, so his father came to excommunicate him completely from his property. So then he wouldn't have gotten anything. And now that he's a Talmud Chacham, so he wants to get everything. But before it would have been nothing. So the fact that he's a Talmud Chacham would mean getting something over nothing. So then he's saying, no, I want to get nothing. Or the other pshat is that no, he just wants to get at least the same portion as everyone else. That's it for Perek Gimel. There's just Perek Beis. There's just two nukudas that I wanted to speak about. Two interesting ideas. One is like this, based on what we learned in this parak. It just comes out very interesting. The lashon in the Mishnah in Mesachos Avos in Perek Beis, Mishnah Yud, and the way the Mishnahs are broken up over here, but they're broken up differently in different places. So Chamisha Talmidim Hayalei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 Talmidim. Ve'elohein: Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yossi Kohen, Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Aruch. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, that's the hero of our story. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, who in the Hakdama we mentioned that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shua are always arguing. So that's this Rabbi Shua ben Chananya. Rabbi Yossi Kohen. I didn't make a point of this last week, but when we spoke about the two hosts, who was hosting Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer, so he said, who are your hosts? He said Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Rabbi Yossi Kohen. These two people who are also Talmid of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and one of them would be later the person, his bar pluk say, his interlocutor, or I don't know how to say the word in English, something like that. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would speak about the praises of all 5 of his Talmidim. Now listen to what he says over here, and tell me if any of them sound familiar. He would say over their praises. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, bar sud she'eina ma'abed tipa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is like a pit that was filled with plastered, so that if you fill it up with water or something, nothing will get lost because it won't get absorbed into the ground because there's plaster won't absorb. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, Ashrei Yeladatei. Rabbi Shua ben Chananya, praiseworthy is the one who gave birth to him. Rabbi Yossi HaKohen Chassid, he's a pious person. Rabbi Shimon ben Nisanel, Yirei Chet, he's fear of sin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Aruch, Kemayan Mizgaber, he's like a powerful stream. It's interesting that in our parak in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when we have this interaction between Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Eliezer, we have him talking about 3 out of these 5 praises about Rabbi Eliezer specifically. Well, the first one, Bor, Rabbi Eliezer says about himself. Fine. The second one is Ashrei Yeladatei, which was what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used to say, to get Hyrcanus to see the greatness. And the last one is Kemayan Mizgaber, which over there in the Mishnah he says about Rabbi Eliezer ben Aruch, but over here in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer he says it about our Rabbi Eliezer. So it's interesting how it fits with the Mishnayos over there. Maybe it's like you see that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai uses those phrases, those expressions. Another nekuda, as I said before, that we'll talk about this, that it said that when Rabbi Eliezer was darshaning, it says, you couldn't tell if it was day or night when he was darshaning. So there's a very interesting stira in 2 different stories that are brought down, not a stira, but ha'ara in 2 different stories that are brought down, very similar stories, and the Adaris wants to say a pshat in it. We know in the HaGadol shel Pesach, It's a famous story. Ma'isa Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Kiba, Rabbi Tarfin, Shoyu Mesubin b'Bnei Brak. They were having. It's not clear if it was Pesach or if it wasn't Pesach, but they were having a Mesubin in Bnei Brak. They were talking about Eretz Yisrael the whole night. Until the Talmidim came knocking at the door and said, Rabbi Say, it's time for Kriya Shema. You're gonna miss Zman Kriya Shema. So they were learning, handling the whole night in Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't realize that it was day till the Talmidim came. And there's a similar story in the Tesef. It's brought in the Tesef to Perek Yud Mesachas Pesachim. It says, "Ma'aseh b'Rabban Gamliel v'Zekanim shayu mestubin bebeis baisus ben zaynim belud." Rabbi Gamliel and the elders were having a suda pashtus on Pesach night, also in the house of Baisus ben Zaynin in Lud. Now, it's interesting that Lud was, we said, the place where Rabbi Eliezer was the Rav. V'yoiskin behelchos haPesach kol halayla, and they were handling helchos haPesach. I think another Girsa says that they were handling Yetzias Mitzrayim the whole night, ad Kresa Gever, all the way till the what's it called, till the crow, not the crow, the rooster crows, and Kevan Sha'ala Amud Shachar Higbil. Once the sun came up, Kevan Sha'ala Amud Shachar Higbil. They lifted up the window, or they lifted up their eyes. They lift up their eyes, and it became known to them that it was day. And they went to the shul. So here, once it became sunlight, they realized, and then they went to shul. In the first story, in the HaGadol Shel Pesach, they didn't realize until the Talmidim came knocking at the door. So what's the difference between the two? So the Adaris wants to say a very interesting pshat. This Adaris has a pirush on the Balaturim on Chumash. It's called Ateres Adar. In Parshas Vayikra, he talks about this. He writes that in the story in the HaGadol Shel Pesach, who was there? Who was among the people that was participating in the Suda? Rabbi Eliezer. Now, when Rabbi Eliezer is there and he's darshaning, you can't tell the difference between day and night. So they couldn't tell the difference between day and night until the Talmidim came knocking at the door. In the story in the Tosefta Pesachim, it doesn't say that Rabbi Eliezer was there. So there, once it became crack of dawn, they were able to see that the sun is coming up and they get up. But when Rabbi Eliezer is there, you can't tell the difference between day and night. That's what the Adaris wants to say. But Rabbi Yaakov Chaim Sofer, a grandson of the Kafa Chaim, he has a sefer called Kerem Yaakov. In Siman Yud Daled, he brings down this Adaris and he says it's not muchach, because we don't find in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer over here that it says that every time Rabbi Eliezer was darshaning, you couldn't tell the difference in day and night. It says in this story, when this happened, you weren't able to tell the difference in day and night. But it doesn't say every time he darshans. So it's not muchach what he's saying. It's a cute word. Alright, that's the end for Perek Beis for this week. Just to give the schedule for what I'm hoping to do, if we still have people. This week was Perek Beis. Next week and the week after that is going to be Perek Gimel, which is going to be the story of the beginning of Ma'aseh Bereishis. What Hashem created the day before Ma'aseh Bereishis, what Hashem created the first day of Ma'aseh Bereishis. Perek Daled talks about the second day of Ma'aseh Bereishis, which is the day that Hashem created Malachim. And when he starts talking about Malachim, he goes into Ma'aseh Merkava and all kinds of Kabbalistic things. We're going to skip Perek Daled, at least for now. And then we're going to do Perek Hey. So we're going to do Gimel for 2 weeks, and then Hey, which should take a week. And then Hey is talking about the third day of creation. Then afterwards, it talks about the fourth day of creation, which is about the celestial bodies, the sun and the moon and the stars and all these things. It goes into a lot of astronomy and astrology and zodiac and these type of things. We're going to skip that as well. So we're going to do Hey, and then we're going to skip Vav and Zayin. And then Ches, which is still talking about the fourth day of creation, but it's not as technical, but it's more about different, like Soid HaIbur, about adding an extra month to the year. That we're going to do. So we're going to do from Ches to onwards, and that's going to be that's the schedule basically till Chanukah, and then we'll see what happens afterwards. All right, a good talk. Thank you for coming.